Welcome to SciTech Culture with Steve Kern and Ben Warner, where we examine science, technology, and culture in the 21st century. Visit our website at scitechculture.com.
Tis the season to be buying iPhones, apparently. We're in September, so that means it's Apple's September event, Steve. We're here again, and naturally we have to do an episode on this. It's something we come around to each year just to see where Apple is. I'm sure it'll be an interesting little discussion. But before we get on to that, just wanted to have a touch quickly on Queen Elizabeth's passing. It's quite a historic moment in history. A huge public figure. Known by all pretty much. I would think. I found myself thinking of the historical context too, just how much of a span her reign actually covered, and how much the world had changed since she assumed the role back in it's probably early, somewhere around. I'm not even going to quote it, so it's probably not much point. I'm not that much of a history buff on it, but obviously the world was so different when back then, and now it's so different now. And when you think of that span of history, it's just remarkable, and how she kind of played into a lot of so many historical events, etc.
Oh yes, coming to the throne post World War II. I guess science, technology, and culture. The shift over the last 70 years has been phenomenal, and she had to navigate that. And I think if you really think about it, she's probably one of the most followed and photographed people in the world. And to maintain, I guess, the schedule that she did is probably testimony not only to her own fine qualities, but to those of the advances in medical science. I think if we look also historically at the amount of footage that there exists of her, we see it move from film to video to even to social posts, in the last few years. So she's navigated so much, and done a fine job. So very sad day, because it also means, I think, for all of us, what we're seeing now is a generational change in science, technology, and culture. And the future will be even more different to the past.
Absolutely. Okay, so moving on to our first topic and main topic of today, I should say, the Apple's September event, where they traditionally launch all the new iPhones, etc. A lot of interesting things there. I know there's an argument around the updates are becoming a lot more iterative these days. The Pro line got probably the most of the love with the camera update. And things like the dynamic island, hilariously called. I thought that was where they come up with these names. I don't know. That's apparently added functionality to the pill-shaped cutout, as it had been called in the rumors, etc. I mean, okay, something to make it look different to the previous ones, I guess. The regular iPhones didn't get as much attention, although the Mini was swapped out with a plus-sized model, because larger phones are the option of choice for a lot of people. But before we get into some of that, I did want to touch on this concept of Apple moving away from super cycles. So the idea that, for instance, in the earlier days with earlier iPhones, there were like the iPhone 6 in particular had a super cycle. There was such a pent-up demand for a larger screen iPhone, and that was the first larger screen iPhone that was available. And it saw a spike in demand. It was the biggest selling model by far up until that point by a wide margin. But then that led to a dip the following year in terms of sales, because so many people upgraded in the 6 super cycle, as it was called. Now it seems what's happening is, obviously they got on to this, and I think they want no super cycle to be there, because they just want people buying iPhones all the way through the year constantly, as they have a need to upgrade. And that's kind of the impression I'm getting with the successive releases of the iPhone, is that if you look at like the 12, 13, and 14 ostensibly look the same. There are hardware changes in there, but nothing too drastic. But instead of, say, you upgrading from the previous year's phone or maybe a 2-year-old phone, the iPhone 14, for instance, is now, I guess, geared towards the iPhone owner from 3 years ago or 4 years ago. So anyone that's, got an iPhone 10 or an iPhone 11 or earlier than that. And that's kind of where Apple's going, it seems.
Yeah, part of it could be component driven, but part of it just seems to me, really what more can they pack in? They're putting in the incremental hardware upgrades and trying to find features for them, if you ask me. I I don't know. I'm a bit underwhelmed. Maybe that was the argument you were referring to, the one we had before we got on. I'm quite underwhelmed. I mean, I don't need a super cycle, but I need to feel that, the phone that I've got is somehow moving forwards. Apple is good at that. The software upgrades will keep my 13 relevant. Um, but I didn't see anything, that would make me rush out and buy a phone unless I absolutely needed one. So maybe, but even if I absolutely needed one, I'd be waiting another 12 months now for the 15.
Yeah, unfortunately, I haven't taken your advice on that one, only because I'm gonna upgrade to the 14 from my 12. So this will be the last time that we'll be using the 12 Pro Max to film this SciTech Culture episode. I should have it by next Friday, so I'll be able to put that 48 megapixel camera to use for our for our episodes going forward. So we'll see how we go with that.
Well, that's right. Look, there is always an incremental increase on Apple products, but and maybe we are too focused on super cycles or new features. But look, even the sort of dynamic island, always on screen, this sort of stuff has been on Android devices for a while. To me, it adds functionality to the phone, so great, but it should have been something that, would be expected. I don't see it as a selling point.
Well, I think we've moved past that now, because arguably the explosion in features was in the first half of the iPhone's history. And yes, Android makers like Samsung typically push the envelope. They even literally changed their design language year on year. And as a joke to Apple being behind, Samsung's released an ad, with the tagline 48 megapixels. You're almost there, Apple. We've had 108 megapixels for 2 years, 6 months, and 4 days. So it's I can see where, but maybe that's, I don't know. Maybe that's just part of the market. Maybe you've got it seems like Apple's comfortable with the idea of being the phone for people who are not looking at this stuff, who just want the phone, and the Android makers, if you want the bleeding edge with a lot of new features and changes, etc., especially at the top end, then you go the Android phone.
Look, you're absolutely right, but I think that Apple's getting squeezed a bit here. So Apple used to be a phone which was a one-stop shop. On my Android phones, I can still get mountable media. So if I need an extra 256 gig, I can just pop it in the slot and I can take it out and I can read it. And I can do that quicker than you can get that out of an Apple phone. We're going to higher and higher megapixel cameras. Apple have got the feature, even though it's not activated, as you were telling me before, with the ultra wide to allow for 8K video. They're going to have to release the 15 with a USB-C port. I mean, there's no other way if they go to 8K video, and because they've only got minimum onboard storage, and there's no way to get it off quickly. So I wonder if there's a bit of a squeeze now. Probably if you're an Apple user, traditional Apple user who just likes the good quality, ease of use video, you don't really care about what Samsung's got. You're very happy with what you've got on the iPhone, but we're now at a point where at some stage I'm going to need to get that off. And if I'm shooting in 8K, I mean, that's going to burn up gigs a minute. So
I was going to say too, and we were talking about it before we got on about the value proposition, and this is purely at the top end because a lot of the Samsung phones are probably the direct equivalent on the Android side of the iPhone, and they cost just as much. But they've actually removed removable storage and all that stuff as well, which I think is interesting. But they probably still have an easier way to get it off the phone than what Apple does, and that's just why it's kind of a mixed bag, I guess, when you look at it in terms of what's available and what they're making available. One thing, like the keynote, was very strange to me because apart from being very long, they actually were focusing on features like some very niche features like car crash detection and emergency satellite connections, which are they're a nice thing to include there, but they did like spend an excessive amount of time going through these features that might be great if it happens. We don't want to be in a car crash, of course, but if you happen to be in one, are you going to have one every week where this is going to happen, kind of thing? It's a nice thing. I'm not knocking it, but it's also they chose to focus so much on it. But it might be because they didn't have anything else to say.
well, I tend to agree, and to be honest, there's a lot of car crashes every day, and you wonder, like, that's great that Apple is going to contact someone to let you know that potentially you're not well or something, but are our emergency services primed to cope with all these automated messages? I wonder what's the knock-on effect of that. I must say, the idea of being able to access satellite comms in an emergency is fantastic as well. And hopefully, all that means is that if I am out somewhere hiking or something like that, I'm going to be late, I can still send a text to say, don't worry about me. But if it's going to go to the emergency services, then I wonder really what the functionality of that is, except the emergency services receiving an extra 100 texts each weekend saying, I'm okay, don't come and get me.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because Apple also threw in that service would only be free for the first 2 years as well. And then presumably they're going to start charging for it, which the implication is that they apparently have a back end that they're setting up for it themselves.
Which I would then say that would mean that in a place like Australia, it won't matter where you'll be, you'll always be able to send a text. Maybe that's a feature worth waiting for in the iPhone 16.
Absolutely. I guess one other thing I wanted to mention, the 13 mini is still around. For those that still want the small phone, I thought that was interesting that they left it in the lineup. I almost thought they were going to axe that given the poor sales and whatnot, but they
got so many left over, Ben. They probably pre-ordered too many.
Yeah, that's right. Got to keep them punching through. The only other thing would be the 14 plus, I guess, is I actually think that's got a certain value to it in the sense that it's the first time they've offered a big screen phone but at a lower price point. I've no doubt there'll be a lot of people that'll probably snap that up because previously you had to get the Pro Max to get the larger screen size. So it kind of makes sense why they would do that, especially in the light of how poorly, I guess, the Mini did in previous cycles.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, while I probably, a year or two ago would have said the Mini was the phone for me, by today's standards, it's just too small. And so, I think, I'm not surprised to see it go, to be quite honest. It looks small and dinky, and there's really no place for it in the modern age.
Absolutely. Before we move on to our last topic, also just wanted to mention there was a new Apple Watch that was released, which I thought was interesting for two reasons. One was how durable, I guess, they decided to make it, for the extreme user, the one, people that dive to 100 meters or they're in ultra marathons, or they're running through a desert. Like they had all the images in the keynote of all these people doing all these crazy things in snowstorms and whatnot. And this watch could actually, take it. It's for that user. And they didn't overprice it considering what it could have been priced at in terms of the lineup. So I thought that was an interesting addition to the lineup, and a way to, I guess, maybe invigorate some more interest in the Apple Watch itself, because the Series 8, which is the I guess the normal one that normally gets released, virtually no changes compared to last year. So and I guess one other aspect I wanted to mention on that Apple Watch Ultra, it's clear that Johnny Ive is no longer at the company, because it's not a pretty looking watch.
Well, I've never had a Apple Watch. I always thought or assumed that it must be reasonably durable, because they always show people swimming, running, walking, climbing, etc., with them. So I wonder if there's so little new on the Apple Watch that they just took an angle, that, that they could, which is say it was more durable. I would have thought that the technology on the Apple Watch would always have lent itself to durability. I haven't seen too many of them smashed or people complaining about them, as I have Fitbits. So who knows?
And maybe that they're trying to compete with Garmin or something like that as well. But
could be. But I tell you what, the best watch is a Coros watch. That's my recommendation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the only other thing that was of note to announce product-wise was the second generation AirPods Pro. Like I've got the original ones, and they're great. The additional functionality around better noise cancellation, better transparency mode, and sort of additional functionality within those modes as well, which is kind of a core feature for a device like that, was welcome. So that was kind of nice that they included that, and it's an obvious accompaniment to the iPhone in terms of two products going together. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people buying both sets at the same time.
Well, that's right, but I mean, yeah, I still haven't forgiven Apple for removing the earphone.
Oh, the headphone jack, yeah. Absolutely. All right, well, and just finally, a completely different topic now. I had to touch on this because Jaws is one of my favourite films of all time. It's probably got to be in the top 5, I'd say, and it was definitely an influence on me in wanting to produce content and films and whatnot. But the US recently had a National Cinema Day where they screened a whole bunch of older movies for $3 a ticket, just to, I guess, spruik interest in reattending, the cinema after the last few years of COVID and lockdowns and any anxieties around that. And Jaws made the cut. It got to number 10 on the top 10 of the hits for the day, which for a 47-year-old film kind of shows that despite it maybe looking a bit aged, it's kind of 70s look and all that it's known for, it still packs a punch when you watch it.
I'd love to see it now on the digital remaster and see what it looks like in the cinema. But look, it's a fantastic film, and good storytelling never goes out of fashion.
Absolutely. And it arguably, well, not arguably, I think it was one of the 3 major films that kicked off what became to be known as the Hollywood blockbuster. So it was kind of in succession. It was probably The Godfather first, then Jaws, and then Star Wars really kicked it into gear. So it was at a time that, was, I guess, a very exciting time in the industry where things were getting reformed and whatever. I lament because, movies like this don't exist anymore, unfortunately. But, it's good to sort of take a trip down memory lane in this respect.
I can't stop saying it's a fantastic film. And, the suspense and the terror, it captures the human psyche so well.
Absolutely, and you will be afraid to go back into the water.
Yeah, just don't watch Jaws 2 or 3.
Yeah, that's right. All right, Steve, we might wrap it up there. I guess, yeah, next week, new iPhone. We'll see what it can do. I'm sure it's going to look exactly the same because I'll master it down for YouTube anyway. But at least we can have a bit of a play and a bit of fun with it.
I look forward to seeing what it's all about.
Absolutely. All right, so don't forget to check out our website, scitechculture.com. You can get all of our links and content there. You can subscribe to our YouTube and Vimeo channels, RSS feeds, and watch us on any and all of your devices. And we greatly appreciate your visits to our website and the views to our channel. All right, so that's it for this episode. We'll catch you next time.